Welcome back, guys. Fahir here from AwesomeTuts.com, and in the previous video we talked about an important concept which is called coroutines, which enables us to have a delayed behavior in our games. Now I want to talk about another cool feature that we can use, which is really important, and it will be, presented to us, or it will be there with us during our game development when we use different resources provided to us by Unity. And this concept that I want to talk about is called delegations. So we create delegates and we create events to execute those delegates. How does that actually work? Well, going back here in the scene, notice here in the scene, I have a tester. So the tester game object who has the tester script attached on him. And also here I have the player who has the wizard script attached on him. I'm gonna go in the wizard script, and we know that we are inheriting here from the player who is inheriting from mono behavior. That means that in our wizard script, I can create void start, or we have the start function which we are gonna use to run our code. And we have the awake function, we can use the update, so on and so forth. But what I wanna do here now, I am gonna create a delegate, an event who is along or comes along with that delegate, and we are going to subscribe to it, and then we are going to execute, and I am going to explain what is going on. So in order to declare a delegate, we are going to type public delegate void. Now, of course, void is if you don't want this delegate to return anything, but if you want him to return something such as an integer, you can type delegate int, and now you give it a name. So I'm going to say player died and declare it like this. So this is a delegate that we have declared. And now we need to declare an event that we are going to subscribe to and call this delegate when we need to. And it goes like this: public static event, and we're going to call it player died, or actually we're going to create it from player died delegate, and we're going to name it player died like this. Of course, this right here depends on you. So the name depends on you. I have put on purposely player died because let's assume we are playing our game and we want to inform our game manager, game controller, whoever is taking care of the game progress. We want to inform him when the player dies. And that's why I have named this one player died. And of course, the event following this delegate, or the event created from this delegate, needs to have that same name. So we are going to create it from player died. If here we had another name such as player game finished or something like that, we will put that right here. So this name right here needs to match this name right here. But this one is dependent on you. It's like a variable name. So you give it a variable name. Now going in the tester class, in order to subscribe to this event right here, we need to create a function, because this is how delegation works. We create a function that is going to subscribe to this event. And when we call this event, then the function that we have subscribed with, so the function that we have subscribed to this event will be called. Let's go through it and I will explain what is going on. So since we have declared here that it is void, that our delegate is void, it does not return anything, then we are going to declare also a function, our function, to be void. And here I'm going to name this function executed after event call. And we're going to open close parentheses. Of course, here we are not going to put any parameters, since here we did not specify that our delegate takes any parameters. If the delegate takes any parameters, then we can pass them through here, same way as we did with our functions. So now going back here, how can we subscribe using this? So how can we subscribe this function to this event right here? Well, for that, we are going to do it in void on enable, and we are going to do it also, we are going to unsubscribe in void on disable. So what is this right here? Well, we know that we have void start and we have void awake, which are used for game initialization. Now, I did not want to talk about this right at the beginning because I wanted to get to this point where we actually need to use them. And now I'm going to talk about them. So when we go in the Unity editor and when I click this run button, so when I click on it and the game runs, every script that is attached on some game objects here, so every script that is attached on the game object, any game object, not only tester or player, even it can be attached on the camera later on our zombies or maybe other enemies and whatnot. So every script will begin its execution. The very first function that is going to be called in every script is the awake function. So void awake function. That is the very first function that is going to call, and usually here you're going to put your code that you want to execute. That is for initialization, so for setting up variables, preparing the game for the player to play it. After awake is called, you think start is going to be called, but actually in the documentation it says that void onEnable is going to be called. So after awake, onEnable is the function that is next one that is going to be called, and after it, then void start is going to be called. And all three of these can be used for initialization, but usually you're going to use awake and start more often than void onEnable. OnDisable, on another hand, is, well, what is the opposite, forgot the word, so the opposite of enable. So onEnable is called in the beginning when the game is started, but when the game ends, so when I go here and I hit the run button to run the game is running. When I hit this button again to shut down the game or to close it, then onDisable is going to be called. So onDisable is called when the game object holding this script is either being deactivated, and it is deactivated if I take the game object, and notice here near this cube we have this checkbox, and when I uncheck it, the game object is being deactivated. So when the game object is being deactivated, onDisable is going to be called, and when the game object is destroyed, such as when we have zombies and monsters and we kill them, they get destroyed, then onDisable is going to be called. And here we can dump unnecessary things such as the things that can affect our memory and whatnot. And why did I explain all of this right now? Well, because the best functions to subscribe and unsubscribe to an event from a delegate is in onEnable and in onDisable. Now, how can we subscribe? Well, since I've made the event to be static, we can access it by calling the wizard.variable name, and the variable name is player died. So we can access this event by using wizard.player died. So going back here in onEnable, because we want to subscribe to that event when the game starts, we are going to call wizard.player died, and here it is, public static event player died, and we see here in this summary. And now in order to subscribe this function to this event, we say plus equals, same way as we add to our variables. So plus equals, and here we are going to simply pass execute after event, not execute it ended mode, but execute after event call, and simply end the statement. And I said this is how we add to our variables. We know that we have, for example, if we have int a is equal to 1, we can say a plus plus, which is equivalent to typing a is equal to a plus 1. But if we want to add, for example, 5 to a, instead of typing a is equal to a plus 5, we can do it like this. We can say plus equals 5. It's the same as we say a is equal to a plus 5, but this is a shortcut. So this right here is a shortcut instead of typing this. This is what I meant when I said same way as adding with our, or adding things to our variables. So now we have subscribed to the event called player died, which is this one right here. How can we unsubscribe? Well, here we typed plus equals. Now, in order to unsubscribe, we type minus equals. And it's always, always, always a good idea when you subscribe to an event in onEnable that you have this piece of code or this line of code in onDisable to unsubscribe from the event, or some complications can occur. And I saw that during the development. So it is best that you also put this line of code just in case, so that you unsubscribe from the event. Okay, now that we have subscribed to event, what we want to do here, I'm simply going to use the print statement, and I'm going to say called after event, or printed after event was called. So how can we now call this event to execute? Well, this event is like a pointer. When we have something, when something has subscribed to that event, as we did right here, then this event is pointing to that variable. But what I mean when I said it's a pointer, it can be null. If it's not pointing to anything, it can be null, same way as objects. So it's a good idea that before we call this event, we actually test it out. So we are going to say if player died is not equal to, and this is how we test if things are not equal to. This is how we test if it's equal to null. So double equal sign, we are testing if it's equal to, and when we add exclamation mark and then this equal sign, that means that we are testing if it's not equal to null. If it's not equal to null, that means that we have some class has been subscribed, or we have a class that has been subscribed to this event. In this case, the tester class has subscribed to this event using the execute after event call function. And now, since we test that and we see that it is okay, so it is not equal to null, we can simply call it like we call a regular function. So player died, open close parentheses, and end the statement. If we had any parameters here, then we will need to pass them like, for example, we have an integer and then we have a string, then we can pass them like this. And then they will be, well, visible right here. They will be visible right here inside of this function, and then we could, well, use those variables. So if I run the game now, what do you think is gonna happen? So let us go here and test it out. I'm quickly gonna clear the console. When I hit the run button, notice what is gonna be printed in the console. Let us just wait for Unity to take its time. Finally, notice here, printed after event was called. So this, now we see that it's printed, and it is printed from here, and we did not call anywhere. You see, I did not call anywhere this execute after printed call, and I can even use this. I can do it like this. So I can say enumerator, not enumerable, enumerator, call function, and I can say like this, yield, return new, wait for seconds, let's say 2 seconds. And I'm gonna call this after 2 seconds just so that we can see that we don't need to call it right away. And that is the usual way. So start coroutine, passing here, call function. Now, we are not gonna usually call our events like this in the start function right away. We are gonna wait for something to happen. In this case, we have player died. So when the game starts, we are going to subscribe to that event from here, or from class that is responsible to handle that event. And then when the player dies, we're going to test if player life count is equal to or less than 0, then we are going to call this event. But I'm just going to show you that we don't need to call it right away. We can wait until something happens in order to call it. So I'm going to run it right here, and notice after 2 seconds, we're going to see that everything, so printed in the console, was called right now. Now, I'm going to take the highlight tool and explain by drawings what this actually means. So what is event and delegation? So think of it like this. So we have here the delegate, so delegate like this. And this delegate is, let's assume that our delegate is a letter that we need to deliver to somebody. But we don't care who wants to deliver that letter. And here is the event. So the event from this delegate is the letter. So here we have the letter, and we want somebody to deliver this letter to, let's say here, X point, which is some person. Now, we don't care who wants to deliver this letter. Only we care that this person, this right here, this X person, gets this letter. And we say, let's say in our family, we say, look at this letter, I'm gonna put it here. Make sure that this letter is delivered to Carl. I don't care who delivers it, but just make sure that it is delivered when I tell you to. And this is, when I said now tell you to, this is right here, this right here. So we said to somebody, when I tell you to, the letter will need to be delivered, but we don't care who. But that somebody is this, well, right here, tester class, who has subscribed to that event. So let's say our son has subscribed to the letter event, and he is waiting for our instructions or our instruction to tell him when to deliver this letter. And then we make a call. So we make a phone call and we say, okay, does anybody have that letter? This is testing if it's not equal to null. So if anybody wants to take that letter. So does anybody have this letter? And our son is going to say, yes, I have the letter. And then, okay, son, deliver the letter. And then he is going to go over here and deliver that letter. So this is visually explaining things. So again, the letter is this right here, the delegate, or the event from this delegate. This is the letter that we need to be delivered. And now we say, okay, this letter needs to be delivered. I don't care who it is, my wife or my kids or my grandparents. I don't care. I just need that letter to be delivered. And then somebody from them will subscribe to that letter event. So somebody will subscribe. In this case is our tester class who has subscribed with the execute after event call function, which is this one right here. And we don't know that and we don't care. But when we take a call, this is we. So we are now calling, okay? Is anybody or does anybody have that letter? Does anybody want to take that letter? So if it's not equal to null, meaning we have somebody who wants to deliver that letter. And if they say yes, well, somebody will take care of that. And I say, okay, deliver it now. And this is calling that function, deliver it now, meaning execute it now, and they are gonna go and get that letter to the person that we need to. And when we call this event, in terms of that, it is gonna call this function because we have subscribed with that function to this event right here, meaning that when the event executes, this function will be called and the code that is here will be executed. So in this example, we have player died and we subscribe here to that event because we are the one, this delegate, again, I'm repeating because this is really important and I saw that some of the students had problems with this. So I'm explaining it in a little bit more detail. This delegate and this event don't care who subscribed to this event. They only care that it gets executed when it needs to or when it gets called. So this tester class has subscribed to it and now it is waiting for us to give it a call. And after we play our game and we die and the player has been killed, we test if the player died, which is this event, is not equal to null, meaning somebody has subscribed. And in our case here, that's true because the tester class has subscribed with this function. Well, if that's true, then please execute that event now because we need to inform you that the player has died. You need to wrap up the score. You need to restart the game or prompt the user to play again and whatnot. So this is my point, or this is what event and delegation is. Of course, we can add here parameters. So I can say here int a comma int b like this. And now when we execute it here, I am going to put 2 and 6 for int a and b. But we do need to change the signature of this function. It cannot be now like this. It needs to have 2 parameters, int a comma int b. Of course, you can give it these parameters, you can give them names however you want. You don't need to give them names like here, int A and int B. You can give them int Carl and B Kenny. I don't know, however you want to do. And notice now we don't have any errors, which means that we can actually do this and now print it after the event was called. And actually, instead of that, I'm going to say number 1 is, so number 1 is, and I'm going to say plus A. And here I'm going to say number 2 is, and I'm going to say down plus B. So this will now be executed when we call this function or when we call this event and passing these 2 parameters. So now here, number 1 is going to be 2 and number 2 is going to be 6. Let's check that out and see if it's actually true. So when I hit the run button, we are going to see, did we call? Yes, we called it, but in the coroutine, I was like, what is going on? What? But here it is. Number 1 is 2 and number 2 is 6. Why? Well, because we passed those parameters right here. And the same way you can specify, instead of void, returning an integer or returning a string or whatever you want to return. But usually you're only gonna pass parameters or simply call a function with no parameters. But I just showed you how you can pass parameters. And of course, again, I'm telling you, you can use, instead of void, integers, strings, and whatnot, and for these parameters also. Now, in short, this was about delegation, and if you're wondering for what is this useful, I just gave an example here for the player died. For example, if we have our gameplay controller who is controlling the score, who is controlling to prompt the user when the player dies and whatnot, he needs to be informed when the player dies so that he can prompt the user to restart the game, play again, maybe buy some more coins to continue the game and whatnot. Also, when we load levels, so this scene right here that we are currently in, this is our scene that I named. Let me just take a look at it. I think I named it tester scene. Yeah. And every scene represents a different level. This is how we create different levels. And if you want to check which scene has been loaded, then you will need to use event management or scene management, excuse me, and you will need to subscribe to an event from that scene manager or scene management, and that event will inform you when the scene has been loaded. So we will see that later on, do not worry, but I'm just giving you some examples for what we are going to use it. And this was it about delegates and events, which are pretty useful and super important to know. Fahir here from AwesomeTunes.com, and I will catch you guys in the next video.